Thanks, everyone. Richard asked me to speak today. He said, we'd really like you to tell your story. You have 10 minutes. I'm nearly 60. That's a lot of story. Just squashed into 10 minutes. Hi, everyone. My name's Naomi. I am a life insurance-aholic. Well, I must be, right? Because why else would I have been involved in founding 3 life insurance companies in New Zealand over the last 40 years? From being the founding employee of Sovereign when I was just 24 years of age, charged with building the operational processes and systems of a startup company, and then leaving 11 years later as Chief Operating Officer with 600 reports, overseeing operations, sales, IT, marketing, contact centre and HR. When I left, Sovereign had grown into the largest life company in New Zealand, to being the founder of Club Life in 2001, and then selling it to a worldwide conglomeration called ING and running ING Life successfully over the following 9 years, growing it into the second largest life insurance company in New Zealand by the time I left. And finally becoming the founder of my baby, Partners Life, New Zealand's newest, fastest growing life insurer over the past 12 years, which has recently both completed the acquisition of BNZ Life, while at the same time completing the acquisition of Partners Life by Deutsche Life for just over New Zealand $1 billion. I suspect I'm the first female founder of a business in New Zealand to achieve that, but if not, I don't think there would be too many of us. Partners Life's success has been unexpected and unprecedented. I guess I must have learned a few things along the way. Why life insurance? We sell products that most people don't want and don't want to pay for, but that all people who end up needing it are desperately grateful for. So we do good things for people at the worst times in their lives. In addition to every claim that we paid along the way, I've also got a huge kick out of how many people my startup businesses have created employment for, the number of careers I've helped develop, the number of self-employed advisors whose businesses have been supported by my companies, the amount of international investment that's been brought into New Zealand economy, the return on value that I've been able to create for shareholders, and the competitive pressure that those companies have caused in this market, which has improved outcomes for customers across the whole industry. I am content that New Zealanders are better off because of the work that I and my teams have done, which is not a bad place to be at this end of your career. Bravery is not something that you hear often about in association with women in the workplace. But if I had to choose the one word to explain me, why I have become the first founder of 2 life insurance companies, quite possibly in the world, then bravery is that word that I would choose. I define bravery as being able to take risks, being able to face up to criticism, the willingness to make decisions, having a willingness to face up to, well, what's the worst that can happen, having a fundamental belief in yourself, holding yourself 100% accountable for your own actions, taking responsibility for the outcomes that you get, and not being led by the fear of what other people think of you. So where does that bravery come from? Maybe from being the only girl in the family, smack in the middle of 4 brothers, having to grow up as a real tomboy. Maybe from the competitiveness that comes from playing many different sports at representative level throughout my whole life. Maybe from never being one of the popular kids at school, and therefore not having to worry too much about what other people thought. It was very clear what they thought of me. Maybe from working every school holiday and weekend from the age of 13 to help my parents with very stretched family finances. Maybe from having to stick up for my mother from Tonga in a New Zealand that was incredibly racist when I was growing up. Maybe from my Christian beliefs. Probably from a combination of all of those things. But what I can tell you now is I am very, very glad of it. So how did bravery allow that Pacifica tomboy from a relatively poor background reach such a leadership position within an industry that was notorious for bureaucracy, hierarchy and male domination? At the time I made the decision to join Sovereign, the job market in Auckland was booming and no one else in the industry wanted to take a risk on a startup company when they had a perfectly comfortable, well-paid job already. I, on the other hand, saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something no one else really ever gets the chance to do. And given that the job market was so good at the time, I figured that I didn't have much to lose. If it didn't work, I could always get another job. Now, I know that the founders of Sovereign would have preferred a much older, more traditional, more experienced male operations manager to help them start their new business. But since I was the only person who applied for the job, they really had very little choice but to hire me. Over my 40 years, I have created a number of industry firsts, and yes, even now, I get a great kick out of seeing the work I have been doing since I was a very young woman entrenched across the industry, both here and in Australia, and people say, well, that's the way it's always been done. I really do believe that there is no such thing as a bad idea, provided that you've got passionate people driving them, because passionate people will get anything to make their idea work. If you're brave enough to stick your neck out, then you are not very likely to just sit back and watch something fail at the first hurdle. If you're passionate about the business you're in, then your actions and your decisions will be driven by that passion. Having a real passion makes it really easy for you to articulate your point of view and to be able to sell your ideas to an audience. Not being passionate about your industry, business, or your job is a major handbrake to your future success. So you either need to get passionate or get out and find something that you can be passionate about. I have chosen the words get passionate for a reason, because that's a decision you make. It's not just something that happens to you. It's like happiness, right? Didn't need that. The really nice thing about running your own business is you finally get to put into practice all of those concepts and philosophies you've so passionately believed in. You know, all the things you've criticised about your bosses in the past. If I were running it, I would do it this way. Well, now you are, so now you can. But conversely, the scary part is you have to put your money and a number of other people's money and your reputation where your mouth is. In each case, for me, there are a large number of people just waiting to see us fail. People who told us we would never make it. People who laughed at us, spread malicious rumours about us, including one executive at a competitor who wrote a secret report on Club Life, including a summary of my abilities. And his conclusion was they didn't need to worry about Club Life as a competitor. It would fail because I was too emotionally unstable to lead it. According to some competitors, Partners Life was not going to get a licence, we weren't going to get a credit rating, we were going to run out of money, our products were unsustainable, and on and on and on it went. To me, all of that has been simply fuel for my fire. The more they say these things, the more I was determined to prove them wrong. So those people were and are unknowingly helping us to reach our goals, and for that I am very grateful for their contribution. I won't lie. It's extremely hard work getting startup companies to market-leading positions. There are lots of times when I would be lying in bed at night wondering how we were possibly going to overcome an obstacle, terrified that I had so many other people depending on me and that I was going to let them and myself down. And at those times, what I would try to do is visualise myself sitting in some glass and chrome boardroom overlooking some beautiful view and reminiscing and laughing at the very situation we were currently struggling with. Do you remember how funny, how worried we were about that thing? I can't believe we were so worried. I found that by visualising a time in the future when the crisis had been well and truly resolved, helped me relax and think creatively about a solution to the problem. And you know what? Obviously, there always was one. Generally not the full answer. Sometimes just a tiny next step. But having momentum has always led to reaching a full solution. There are lots of people who aspire to a role like mine. They are attracted to what they think is the power, the remuneration, the profile, but it all comes at a price. My job as managing director involves being the public face of the company, dealing with regulators, addressing problems, finding solutions, mentoring people, driving the staff, calming people down, giving board, shareholders, staff, advisors comfort in a crisis. And boy, haven't we had some lately. All bucks stop with me. There's no one else to blame. In a role like mine, there's not much individual recognition of success. You're doing a very good job, darling. Not many people tell you that. There's no one heaping praise on you, but there's plenty of people willing to tell you when you make a mistake. And you will make plenty of them. And the consequences of my mistakes can be significant and extremely public. It's scary. It takes a significant amount of focus and discipline and self-belief and long, long hours of hard work. But in the end, It's what I truly thrive on, leading. So in a nutshell, I have set out to prove that you can run businesses based on principles and values, and not only will you make money, but you will make more money than you otherwise would. And with the successes of Sovereign and then Club Life and now Partners Life over the last 40 years, I think that I can say that's been emphatically proven to be true. Am I proud of what I've achieved so far? Absolutely. No matter what happens in the future, no one can ever take that away from me. Am I special for achieving what I have? Not special, just brave. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Naomi. That was very interesting. I loved you talking about someone saying to you that you were emotionally unstable. I've had exactly the same thing, so yeah.
It's because you're a woman.
Yes, very much so. So we have 10 minutes as well, so feel free to keep those questions coming through on Slido. But I'll kick off first of all along the same lines that Brian was talking about with your mum. And I've heard you talk about your mum in various interviews, and I'm interested, what's the key thing that she taught you that you've taken on your journey?
So my mum, in my head, was a superhero. So extremely difficult marriage, extremely difficult upbringing, but she just did everything. So she cut the lawns with a machete, paint the house, cook like a demon, like, oh my God, I've never tasted food as good as my mum, and I guess everybody says that. But to me, that little girl growing up, girls could do anything because mum did everything, right? And so I never knew I couldn't and shouldn't. She was never celebrated for it. I think you might have heard me say that wasn't the thing. That was weird. Very good at sports, and like she was just weird. And she was an islander with an accent, and so she was, she was picked on, I guess I would say. But to me, she was just my superhero, and I have lived with my mother on my shoulder the whole of my life, and I hope I never, ever lose her.
Yeah. There's a moment there for all of us, isn't there? And I guess that's the bravery element is really from your mum, and the passion, which is fantastic. And I also say that we sort of come from similar backgrounds as well. I grew up on the hood of the shore and had no degree and started in life insurance. So it's really nice to have someone and comrades, and there's quite a few elements I'm sure that we can all take from that. You talked a little bit about mistakes that you've made, and I think sometimes the best learnings come from those mistakes. So was there anything maybe earlier on in your career that was a great mistake that you have learnt a lot from?
Probably the one I learnt the most from was fairly early on at Sovereign. I was told constantly I didn't look right for the part. I would never dressed right, and I thought maybe it's because I was a tomboy and I didn't know how to put makeup on, because in those days you had to wear stockings and skirts had to be, and you had to wear a suit and, all that rubbish that means nothing. But I truly thought it was me. So I got quite depressed about what's wrong with me. Like, I'm doing all this amazing work, but I just don't look right. And I paid a lot of money, because I wasn't earning a lot in those days, to go to an image consultant to tell me what it was that I was doing wrong. And she just looked at me and she said, "Honey, there's nothing wrong with you." And I realised at that point, and it was probably the start of me going, just because someone else says it, you don't have to wear it, right? That you make a decision, are they right or are they wrong? And if you think they're wrong, they don't count. Just keep going. So I am sad that I didn't know that before that I'd let that get to me so much. But in the end, all it was someone who was a little threatened by me, wanting to keep me in my box. And the box broke after that lady.
There's so many similarities, it's incredible. Okay. You talked a little bit about how running a successful values, that it's based on values and principles in a successful business, sorry. So what are your main value set that you live by?
I think from those Christian beliefs, it's do unto others is probably the one thing that drives everything, and that applies to staff, and it applies to customers, and it applies to pretty much everyone in your world. So treat people the way you believe you would want to be treated, and it's a pretty simple tenet, and it drives everything. And it's the principle of all good conduct, right? Is don't hurt the other person, right? And so if you do that, sometimes it costs you, but in the end it pays off far more than it costs.
And I also know that there's a number of women here who, when you're navigating your careers, there's quite often a man in the driving seat. So we don't all have someone like you to look up to in our careers. And often I'm seeing that women are not getting the next role because they're not seen as wanting it. They're not alpha enough, or they are overlooked because they haven't asked for it. And sometimes it's a cultural thing as well. So do you have any advice as to how to deal with that or deal with the men in our lives?
Well, there's two things. Is deal with yourself first. So if you want a job, ask for it. Why is that a woman thing? That's a person thing. You're a person. Have some self-belief. And the one thing I would say about younger women is they do. And I think that's the massive change that I've seen, that you don't grow up thinking that you can't. And that's just so delightful to see. So that's the number one that I would say. The number two thing is don't cry. The number of times I've had women, like when I'm going, no, you can't have that for that project, and they start crying, and my respect for them goes down. Because I've never done that, right? I'm like, well, if I haven't convinced you of this, I need to go away and find some more words, because I'm going to convince you of it. It's just going to be what words it takes to get there. I haven't done enough homework. I'm going to go away and do that homework, right, to not cry, goodness sake. So if you do those things, if you wait for someone to tell you you're a good girl and now you can have this job, or you cry every time you don't get what you want, you will stay exactly where you are.
Maybe not picking a hormonal time to do that then.
Cry in the toilets.
Is there anything you regret in your life and business? Is there anything you'd do differently?
I don't do regret, really. Maybe if we'd failed completely and I was now destitute, I'd probably regret that, but that's not really where I am. But there's been lots of times where I thought we would be, to be honest. But regret is like you can't go back and change it. You can only do what the next step is. So if you beat yourself up about what you could have done, you won't see the thing that you can do. And so it's really, really important to not get caught up in the feeling sorry for yourself because you're here, and be caught up in the, well, I've got myself here, now I need to get myself out of it.
Keep praising yourself as you're going on the journey.
That's right. A call to action gives you something to do, right? Being stuck in it's not fair means you've got nothing to do, just your thoughts wallowing.
Okay, great advice there. Great. And how do you get balance in your life? What's Naomi look like outside of all this world?
Well, I've always played lots and lots of sports, so that releases the anger. I'm blessed. I'm also blessed by my mother in that every day she woke up happy. It didn't matter what had happened the night before, or how bad Dad had been, or how tough the money situation was. She just woke up happy. I am blessed to be the same person. So it doesn't matter how much I've tossed and turned the night before, I pretty much always wake up positive. So I think that helps that I'm very fortunate for that. But I do run. I know I don't look like I run, but I do run because when I'm completely exhausted and I can't breathe, which doesn't take very long, you can't think about things. It clears your mind, and even just 5 seconds of not thinking about things is like hours and hours and hours in a spa, right? It gives you respite and enough energy to carry on.
And just to touch briefly on your dad as well, because that's a whole other story there, isn't it, with your father?
Dad was incredibly intelligent, had no schooling, very, very bad background, upbringing, and unfortunately had an alcohol addiction. So when he wasn't drunk or craving a drink or hungover, he was amazing. He hunt fish to eat, because we were poor, so we go hunting and fishing. There's the tomboy in me. Still go fishing. But, that kind of stuff. So there were glimpses of who he could have been, and just this demon that just destroyed it. So I guess when you get older you can see that. When I was younger I'd be too scared to go home from school, in case he was there, because it meant he was either drunk or hungover or, not at work. And that's not a nice thing to think about your dad. But when you get older you understand, you put some perspective around it, and you have a bit of respect for both. My mother stuck to him, and, he did his best. Yeah.
And I guess that almost gives you the strength as well, that you think if I've gone through that, I can do anything.
Yeah, Dad his idea of encouraging us at sports was to stand on the sideline. I'm his only daughter, right, playing hockey, and I'm 14 in the under-21 reps, so you don't fit with the under 21s, really, when you're 14 and they're glamazons. They look like the hockey girls do now, and you're the scrawny kid. And, you know, no one wants you in their team because you're not one of the kids, but you happen to be really good. And your dad stands on the sideline of the rep match saying, "What's the matter, fatty? Can't you see the goal?" at the top of his lungs. So you learn some resilience, and what I can tell you is if you can deal with that, because he used to say stuff like, you know, I got an A bursary, and he said just as well when he found out, you know, so, you know, that hurts a lot, but trust me, if you can get through that and not let that sit on your shoulder, because you go, you say that, but I can see that I'm winning these prizes and I'm, you know, doing these things, so what you're saying can't be true. If you can deal with that, then it doesn't matter what other people in your life say. They will never hurt you in that way, and so you can deal with that. So there is a blessing in that you grow some resilience from that, which then means that when you walk into this world and you deal with the sorts of stuff that was around when I was a young woman, it doesn't stick. It just doesn't stick.
And I think I'd like to say thank you for your bravery in even talking about these elements. You know, it's fantastic to hear it. Thank you. Most of the Slido questions that have come through are saying, what's now? Because you have said that you're an entrepreneur, not a CEO, which, you know, right now you're more of a CEO. So what's next on your list?
Stop. That is the truth. This is exhausting, and I'm nearly 60, and I'm done. I am done being the CEO of any company. I've got a job to do, which is to hand this company over to the wonderful people I've got working for me, and they will be fabulous, and they will do something completely different with it than I have done, and I'll be so proud of them. So it's just how I get from here to there. They need the publicity. I need to stop doing these things so people stop hearing about me. But you know, and that's the point, to just stop, because I can't not do what I'm doing 100%. So I can't even think about what comes next while I'm doing this thing. So I need to stop and breathe. I know I can't sit at home, but what I can do is mentor, inspire, encourage, hopefully, outside of just within the industry. So hopefully that's what the future holds.
Well, thank you for doing that here, and I think this has been, actually, it's been a fantastic. Thank you for hearing from you. So please join me in thanking Naomi in the session.